session titled Ensuring Student Accessibility in a Blended Learning Environment. My name is Elliot Markowitz, and I'm the head of content here at Fierce Education. We have a very busy day, and it started with an in-depth interview with Greg Flanick, his CIO of Baldwin Wallace University, and we just wrapped up a session on student engagement. But if you missed either one of those, they will be available for viewing on demand within 24 hours, so please check them out. This session is going to focus on student accessibility challenges and solutions. It's a key part of this remote blended learning world we're in today. One of the major challenges higher institutions are facing is moving to a blended learning environment, is to ensure that all students have access to learning materials, instructors, and support. This goes beyond boosting Wi-Fi and bandwidth and must include online-friendly course design, easily accessible reference repositories, and interactive support systems. Colleges and universities that strive to provide a truly equitable online learning experience need to implement an instructional model that ensures a level playing field for all students involved. Here with us today to discuss these specific issues are Dr. Krishna Pakala. He's with Boise State University. And we have Mark Fuller. He's product manager at Labster, which is partnering with us on this event. But before I officially turn it over to Dr. Pakala, we would like to roll out an audience polling question just to gauge where you are. But before we do that, I just want to remind everyone, please be interactive. There's a Q&A window on your pane. If you type in a question there, we'll try to get to it and pose it to one of our speakers. So let's roll out that audience polling question. And we're going to ask, what is the main challenge in ensuring equity and that all students have access to materials or courseware in a blended learning environment? Is it A, affordability? Many just don't have the proper technology or services. Are there bandwidth issues? Universities are having trouble accommodating all the access needed. Or is it faculty training? Many faculty are not familiar enough or trained to make materials available for remote learners. They may be experts in their field, but they're certainly not technologists. So we're going to wait just a couple of seconds while the audience votes on that. And let's push out those results, Grace. So here you can see when we asked what is the main challenge in ensuring equity and that all students have access to materials and courseware in a blended learning environment, 42% said affordability. Many just don't have the proper technology and services, and we do hear that a lot. However, more than that, 52%, if you look down a little further, faculty just isn't trained enough. And that came up a lot during our first two sessions as well, specifically during our interview with the CIO this morning. So it's faculty training and affordability seem to be the two top issues. And with that, I'd like to formally turn it over to Dr. Krishna Pakala with Boise State University. So take it away, Doctor. First of all, what did you think of those polling results?
Yeah, I think I thought there was a equal distribution should be among all three, depending on where you are, and then how the universities have actually attacked the problem. Even they were caught off guard that this would have happened. So
right,
cool.
Well, take it away.
Thank you. All right, so thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Elliot, for warm introduction. So I propose that we need a paradigm shift. And this is something that I recognized long time back when I started as a faculty member, that we still teach the same way. For many, using the marker and a whiteboard is a big technology shift from a chalkboard. I propose that we need to become more innovative, which we have seen, especially during the pandemic, because a learner-centered higher education ecosystem is essential to providing opportunities for learning, and I think for the advancement in our society. And I firmly believe that we can and we should leverage technology to positively impact teaching and learning experience for each student, particularly for STEM, because I represent the engineering community, and then greatly increase the flexibility and ease with which they can pursue their education. So I think we need to reinvent the platform that we support our students. Are we being innovative where we support them both in and outside the classroom? As you're aware, our system of education and how we deliver and how students learn has evolved over over all these years, and most of them has to do with really good research in terms of how people learn. And I think active learning is something that people have definitely embraced in their classrooms, on top of team building and team learning and critical thinking and having more collaboration in the workspace. And then also going from a teacher centered education system to a learner centered model is also something which is on the rise, and I think that has been even more reinforced, especially during the pandemic. So, a little bit about why I'm here and what my passions are. So, my primary academic research interests are in innovative teaching and learning strategies, use of emerging technologies, use of mobile devices, and other technologies. So, even before the pandemic, there was a time where I was stuck in India due to the Trump visa ban when it happened in 2017. And I was still able to teach my classes from there, even though there was a 11 and a half hour time difference. It was afternoon here in the US, and I had to teach at 1:30 a.m. my time in India. But learning doesn't have barriers. We were still able to manage that at that time. My dream in engineering education, and especially in mechanical engineering education as a researcher, is to transform engineering education to support student success both inside and outside the classroom. And as you can see, for me, the student success is at the center of it. And there are several time tested strategies, evidence based practices that work. For example, building a community is very important to me in my classes, and then providing access, which then helps with retention. Sometimes when people think of retention, they think of keeping them year after year, but nowadays, as you know, it's almost like class after class. Can we really keep them there? Because there's so much that the students are put on, the faculty, staff, administrator, the struggles. And especially depending on where you live in the country right now, there is an attack on education and how people have to teach. There is an attack on academic freedom. So there's a lot of unrest, right? And then we still need to somehow figure out to keep these young minds motivated and continue learning. As we know that these words pivot, evolve, shift, transition, and many more have been there everywhere in press, media, everywhere, right? Um, as you can see, that we have really enjoyed the classroom experience, and we have transitioned to where I had to make a makeshift desk in a short time in my apartment because I didn't have an office desk, because I live on campus as I um, mentor freshman students on campus. So my office is right there. So I never had to, have a desk at home. But the pandemic has forced me to be creative, and the most expensive piece of equipment is right there, as you can see under my laptop there. For the students, what it meant is they had a huge shift in how their academic experiences, co-curricular activities, social events being canceled for student athletes. They could not compete in their dream competitions, right? So there is a lot of sense of loss. And then our president at that time, Dr. Trump, wrote students an email that this is once in a generation experience which will give us new ways of thinking and doing, and that the students will learn to continue to excel and succeed in the face of crisis. And then that's something that they'll take into their careers and personal lives in even in the future. So in all of this, I personally wanted to contribute in a way I can during the turbulent times. As you can imagine, there was no playbook for anybody how to handle the rapid transition to remote teaching and learning when it happened last year in the spring. It was an evolving situation. Still, it needed a lot of adaptations to kind of reinforce learning and also create that engagement in whatever different variables that we had. So we shifted quickly to delivering, for example, the teaching assistant sessions that we have. We trained our student teaching assistants to use iPads and other devices to deliver those interactions remotely. We can still have students show up and engaged. We had a day of digital learning at Boise State before we anticipated maybe we have to go completely remote where we won't have any more instructions on campus. This really helped us to kind of test our capacity and also help as much as we can to get ahead. So we did this on March 13th, and that evening we were told that we were going remote starting Monday. So you can see every university had different timeline for this, but we were lucky that at least we had a day. So one of the things that we can help when we think about accessibility, it's a broad term for me. It is making sure that the students have still are bought into the system. So I quickly changed my syllabus to make it more empathetic tone, and try to build that community with the students. I even built a stimulus package of 5% grade to the student, just to show that we know that we are going to learn something different in addition to what they planned. And then I also had some guidelines that we would kind of follow. I think flexibility, at the same time making sure that the intellectual curiosity is intact and that they learn. But most importantly, it was important for me to somehow make sure the social connections and the personal accommodations are met during this time. And then obviously showing that the human app option is the best option, and the fact that nobody signed up for this, but we have to figure out a way to move on. So some of the things I did, we had some in-class icebreakers in the beginning of the class where students shared their talents. We had our mayor of Boise show up, and we had a pet day where people could show their pets and share something which brings some joy. The other big piece that really changed in my life in the last 1 year, I never wanted to be on social media, and I first started uh, to try Twitter last year, and then I saw how much negativity is there on the social media, and I wanted to see if there is a space where we can reach out to our students and our population where we can really still say we can carry on. So I then made sure I learn all the different platforms and try to come up with good messaging and be authentic in connecting with our students. So the first thing I did, I started sharing, my personal moments with my family, just to try to boost students' morale and campus morale, and then also celebrate our students that semester who couldn't walk for their graduation, but I kind of made several videos highlighting hundreds of students overall, and then I try to share one good moment that connects us all each day in respect to the students and the community. And I was really pleased to see that the students and parents really connected with this approach, and that really helped me kind of understand there is need for being in innovative ways to connect with the students rather than just in the classroom. And then I kind of took that on, and then I kind of put a learning outcome in my course, and I call it develop human connections by embracing digital togetherness. So now the students now create content for me, and then we share between the class, and then if they're okay, we share it with the public, and then build a community that way. In addition to the engineering concepts that they learn, they also kind of embrace this new digital togetherness that we can have in this unique world. On the institutional sense, we were fortunate that Boise State immediately recognized that not everybody had the Wi-Fi. Even some of our colleagues who live in certain parts of the city, there's not the best internet connections for them to do these Zoom sessions for hundreds of students. So our university set up drive-in Wi-Fi hotspots in a big parking lot by the stadium, as you can see in the picture. In a small way to help as we are trying to still figure out what was happening. Um, in the last spring, and then now we have better ways to do it. And later on we realized that we could even utilize this opportunity to kind of do more and help and seek helps and support from the community. So we have our annual Bronco Giving Day, and this year our dean and the administration decided that the money that we will raise will go towards the students' support. And we had a lot of people really contribute to this. We had over 15 grand that was raised to support students. So we gave away Wi-Fi devices, webcams, whatever the students needed to help support them. Finally, I think we are currently preparing students for jobs that don't yet exist, using technologies that haven't been invented in order to solve problems that we don't know are problems yet. I don't think this will be the last step in the innovation. I love this quote where they say, "Sun never sets on innovation," and I think we will continue to evolve. So I will end with this slide and pass it over to Elliot. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Bacala. You certainly first had to work on your own accessibility before you can obviously then work with the university and the students on their Wi-Fi and their bandwidth and their Zoom and their applications and web cameras. So thank you for sharing that with us. I'm now going to turn it over to our partner in this event for a few moments. Here is Mark Fuller. He's product manager at Labster. So take it away, Mark.
Thanks so much, Elliot, and so happy to be here and talk about this topic. This is an extremely important topic these days at my organization and many others like it. And I think everyone here on this call is probably thinking more about some of these issues than perhaps they were before the pandemic in some cases. So there's this question of how can we create learning experiences, learning tools that are inclusive, equitable, accessible to all our students, no matter where they are, no matter who they are, right? And I come from the tool creator, ed tech background and point of view, and so I can provide that perspective because I want to talk a little bit about design. And I really like what Dr. Bacala said about a paradigm shift. I want to just slightly reframe it for my area, which is maybe a mindset change for companies, for edtech providers, and anyone that creates learning tools and learning experiences, which I would say is probably most of us here. If you're an educator, if you're a department, a university, a school, you're probably doing something to create learning tools and learning materials, and learning experiences in some way. So my company, Labster, essentially creates virtual science labs for university students and high school students. And really our vision is to create a world-class laboratory for anyone, anywhere in the world. You may not have a well-funded, beautiful university laboratory right next to your house, but at least we can give you an experience here and kind of walk you through the science and make it come alive a little bit in an immersive experience. So if everything that we're thinking about is dedicated to access and making this equipment, these experiences more accessible to people all over the world, what are we doing if accessibility and inclusion are at the heart of what we're thinking about on a regular basis and how we're designing these solutions? One of the images I sometimes have in my mind is, I imagine a 6-7-year-old child sitting on the sofa tonight, and maybe sitting next to their sibling that's 18 years old and about to go into their first year of university. And they're watching some kind of news program about the COVID-19 vaccine. And the question is, what are the barriers, all of the different barriers between that 6-year-old or that 18-year-old and the next COVID-19 vaccine, God forbid, 20 or 30 years from now, what would potentially be stopping that person from being the person that helps win the Nobel Prize or create the next vaccine or do something in this world? And the answer is, we think a lot these days at Labster and other companies about students with differences, including disabilities. And that's a massive part of what we're trying to do, is to do a better job of building learning tools for these students. But it doesn't stop there, right? Those barriers could be language-based. They could be physical, they could be health-related, but they could be cultural. They could be socioeconomic. They could be geographic, where you grew up, where you happen to be born in the world. Do you live somewhere rural or in a low-income community? What's your family background? How good was the school that you went to? Your prior knowledge? What's your gender, your race, your sexual orientation? What are the funding and budgets in the area you're from? So there are 100 different potential barriers between that student and potential future that they want to achieve and the type of learning that they want to achieve. So I think that learning tools and technology in general can create opportunities to expand access in new ways, make it scalable, make it personalized, make it repeatable, bring students along in different ways. But it has to be more than just being about access. You can create a great online course or a great learning tool and just upload it to the internet, right? And say, I'm done, education fixed. That's not really how it works, right? It doesn't work that way. And really the process is, we need to begin thinking about, how do we design things from the ground up instead of trying to retrofit them, right? So one of the principles that I think maybe we can talk about here or think about is this idea of inclusive design, or maybe you call it universal design, right? And for us, that means, designing for variability, for diversity of needs, for individuals, not the average, right? Not the average, mythical average student. So that means recognizing and respecting the uniqueness of every single student, every learner, every user. It means using design principles that are open and transparent, and that internally your design team that's creating these tools, these courses, is diverse and represents diverse perspectives and life experiences. And then finally, responsiveness to a changing world. Everything is moving all the time, right? Nothing is static. So we need to be adaptive, and we need our learning materials and learning experiences to be adaptive and grow and evolve as well. And in some ways, this sounds obvious, but it's difficult, right? It requires a real mindset change. Imagine an architect or a contractor or a builder, right? And what they need to do to create a building, a structure that accommodates every single different type of person or tenant or user or whatever else it may be, right? And that's I think in some ways a helpful way to think about it, and I'll have a tie in with that in a minute. But at Labster, just as an example of the shift that some ed tech companies, I think, are making beyond their infancy, as we become a little bit more sophisticated about these issues, the last year at our company has been a lot of time, a lot of resources and team members really focusing on making progress. And it's imperfect and it's challenging, but I think that's okay, right? It's a work in progress for all of this, I think probably for everybody on this call. So on our side, that's looked like building a screen reader and keyboard navigation from scratch and sort of grafting it onto our graphics-rich 3D learning environment. So students with vision impairment or maybe hearing impairment in other cases can use these virtual labs like they would never be able to use a lab in person, perhaps. It means opening up these tools and adding alt text to everything. It's adjusting, creating kind of an adjustable text size. It's accommodating color blindness and ensuring that the directions are very clear, not relying on just colors or other types of commands that some people may have problems with. It also means within the tools themselves, making sure there's representation, right? And so it could be what is the skin color of the hand in the avatar in the lab that you're creating? And a few years ago, we began randomizing it. Every time you log in, it represents a different type of user. They look differently. We're working very hard to build out our catalog. So the scientists in there are women of color, people with different body types, ethnicities, genders. They look like the world looks, because scientists don't just look one way, right? And again, it's almost that idea of the average user that doesn't exist, right? And so we need to start designing from the ground up for this diverse and complicated world. Also at Labster, that includes languages. It's beginning to translate our simulations and our virtual labs and our various interfaces into other languages. So people, even within the United States or anywhere around the world, can use this, because that universal access doesn't work if everything is just in English and in American English, beyond anything else. It also means beginning to do the research, beginning to do the work of devices. How can we make this in the future more accessible in different types of devices, a little bit easier for anyone, no matter where they are, no matter their technology level? How do we make it available to them? And it also includes things like creating supplements, offline learning materials, reading materials, things people can review, watch videos, whatever else, to help students along a little bit more that need that extra level of help. So I think education technology companies and publishers, and really all creators of any kind, have opportunities to actually be leaders in this space, instead of just being followers and working to become compliant, let's say. I think maybe many of you are familiar with WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and that's incredibly important, and that's our guiding star these days when we build new simulations. But it shouldn't be about compliance. We should be able to push the status quo forward and not simply do just enough, right? And to go back to the building metaphor, we're not just going back and retrofitting all the old buildings on the block as best we possibly can for all different types of users. But as we're creating new structures, new products, we're building them in such a way that, as much as humanly possible, they are usable in many different types of contexts and in many different ways for different types of users and different types of students. There's plenty of continued challenges. If you're an online tool provider, when people have zero Wi-Fi access and no ability to get in the internet or have any kind of device, it is difficult sometimes to get them materials. Languages aren't easy. Translating online learning tools is not as simple as you might think. It's not putting it into Google Translate. It's a lot more complicated than that. But again, the hope that we have, and that I hope other providers and creators of learning experiences and tools can follow, is that, creating experiences, removing all of those barriers that we talked about, so that no matter your socioeconomic status, wherever you are in the world, whoever you are, you can actually get that great learning experience. So that's it from my side.
Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Dr. Bacala. It's interesting, a lot of the comments that came up, we'll have time for this one question. I just want your comment on it is, it kind of took a world event like COVID to really bring accessibility and inclusiveness to the higher education market. Dr. Bacala, real quick, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, in a way, that is probably the best bright light of the pandemic. To be honest, I think people are paying more attention that there are a lot of areas that the universities can do a better job, especially in the area of mental health. And I think our universities and education systems will be better off after this pandemic for that.
Absolutely. And Mark Lapsa, you talked a lot about it, and you're working with those types of individuals. Your final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you design a learning experience, you could be the smartest person in the world, but unless you're talking to people and testing those courses, those learning experiences, whatever else, with actual human beings who have some of these challenges, it doesn't really make sense. And I agree. Just on that last point, it shouldn't have taken a pandemic to raise this up on the priority list, but in some ways, maybe that is a silver lining behind it. And I know, like, as someone who has people with disabilities in my own family, it took me perhaps moving into an apartment that was 3 stories high that people could not visit me in to really sink in for me what this means, right? And sometimes that that kick in the behind is what you need to really make change.
Right. Yeah, and that was one of the other comments in the chats, and then I'll wrap it up, is, a lot of what we went through and what we're talking about, it's become really personal because the faculty and the universities and the instructors really had to get more personal to what the needs of the students are, right?
Yes.
So I'm sorry to say, but that is about all the time we have for this session, but we have one more left, including a Zoom session coming up at 4:20. Our next discussion will focus on bettering the student assessment process. That's very important. It's the third leg of the stool, as we like to say. Please make sure you join that. There'll also be a chance to network with your peers for a few minutes before that starts. And don't forget, after that last session, there'll be a big Zoom call. You don't have to be on video to join, and you can ask anyone any question you want. You can make some comments, make sure they're appropriate, but it's another chance for everyone to network. So thanks again to Dr. Bacala and Mark for your time and your insights.